Have you ever seen a powerful man lose control of a room without even raising his voice? Not by shouting, not by making a bad deal, not by losing his temper in some dramatic, explosive way, but by saying something so small, so careless, so seemingly insignificant that it quietly revealed who he truly was to everyone around him. And in that single moment, everything changed. Power doesn't always disappear with a loud crash or a dramatic fall. Sometimes it fades. It fades slowly. It fades quietly. It fades when someone you dismissed as nothing, as invisible, as beneath you, turns out to be the one person who can take everything away from you. This is the story of a billionaire who thought he was untouchable. A man who believed his wealth gave him the divine right to treat people however he wanted. A man who publicly shamed a quiet hotel maid in front of his most important investors. He expected her to crumble. He expected her to beg. He expected her to disappear like she always had. Instead, she looked him in the eyes and said 5 simple words that stopped his entire world. "Sir, you can't fire me." And in that moment, the billionaire froze. Because those 5 words didn't just challenge him, they revealed a truth he had spent his entire life trying to bury. This is the story of how one arrogant man tried to destroy a maid and ended up destroying the illusion of his own power. It all happened on a rainy Tuesday night in Chicago, a night that was supposed to end with signatures, handshakes, and a deal worth nearly $2 billion. Instead, it ended in silence. The kind of silence that makes powerful men avoid eye contact, the kind that lingers long after the room is empty, the kind that changes everything. And at the center of it all was a woman no one had truly noticed, at least not until it was too late. The rain in Chicago that Tuesday evening was relentless. It beat against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Grand Horizon Hotel like a barrage of tiny liquid fists trying to force its way inside. But inside the hotel, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the miserable weather outside. It was warm. It was amber-lit. It smelled of black truffles, roasted bone marrow, aged Cabernet, and old money. It was a sanctuary for the city's elite, a place where multi-million-dollar mergers were whispered over plates of Chilean sea bass and perfectly seared Wagyu. A place where deals were made that never made the headlines. A place where careers were ended before dessert. For Marcus Langford, however, it was just another room, another stage, another opportunity to remind everyone who was really in control. At 5'8" years old, Marcus Langford was the ruthless CEO of Langford Capital. He was a titan of industry. His face regularly graced the covers of financial magazines. He was a man of immense wealth and profound, crushing solitude. His posture was rigid. His hair was a distinguished silver, swept neatly back. His face bore the deep-etched lines of a man who had spent his life making ruthless decisions. He dined alone as he had for the past 25 years. He preferred it that way. People were variables. They introduced chaos. Isolation was predictable. He took a slow sip of his 1996 Bordeaux, staring blankly at the rain sliding down the glass. He barely registered the bustling activity of the restaurant around him until a soft, hesitant voice broke through the hum of affluent chatter. "Excuse me, sir. Are you finished with your salad?" Marcus slowly turned his head. Standing beside him was a waitress who looked no older than 24. Her name tag, pinned neatly to her crisp black apron, read, Sophia. She had tired but soft hazel eyes and strands of dark chestnut hair escaping a messy bun. There was a fragile exhaustion about her, the kind that came from working double shifts and carrying burdens too heavy for her slender frame. Marcus gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. Yes, take it. He didn't mean to sound harsh. It was simply the voice he used to command boardrooms bleeding into his everyday life. Sophia didn't flinch. She moved efficiently, her movements practiced. She stacked the small plates with a quiet grace. As Marcus reached across the table to move his wineglass out of her way, the dim atmospheric lighting of the restaurant caught his left hand. Specifically, it caught the ring on his fourth finger. It was not a standard wedding band. It was a thick, brutalist piece of jewelry, custom forged from brushed platinum and inlaid with a dark, jagged band of Gibeon meteorite. At the exact center of the band was a flush-set, square-cut cobalt sapphire. It was a masculine ring, heavy and raw, displaying the distinct cross-hatched Weidmann-Stettin patterns characteristic of fallen stars. There wasn't another one like it in the world, save for its feminine counterpart. Sophia paused. The stack of plates in her hand hovered in midair. Her eyes had dropped to his hand, widening fractionally. The polite professional mask of a high-end server slipped, replaced by raw, unfiltered astonishment. "I'm sorry," she breathed, her voice trembling slightly. She leaned in closer, squinting at his hand, as if her eyes were playing tricks on her in the low light. "Sir, I know this is entirely unprofessional, but—" Marcus's jaw tightened. He despised small talk, especially inquiries about his personal jewelry. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his tone dropping an octave, meant to end the conversation immediately. No problem," Sophia stammered, stepping back slightly, but unable to tear her gaze from his hand. She swallowed hard. "It's just your ring. I've never seen another one like it in my entire life, except—" She paused, her hazel eyes flicking up to meet his formidable gaze. "Sir, my mother has a ring exactly like yours." Marcus Langford sat completely still. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. "Sir, my mother has a ring exactly like yours." For a man who had spent decades commanding boardrooms, crushing competitors, and making decisions that moved billions of dollars, Marcus Langford was not used to being caught off guard. But in that moment, something inside him fractured. His cold, slate-gray eyes that had stared down hostile takeovers without blinking, locked onto the young waitress standing beside his table. Her name tag read Sophia. She looked no older than 24. She had tired but soft hazel eyes and strands of dark chestnut hair escaping a messy bun. There was a fragile exhaustion about her, the kind that came from working double shifts and carrying burdens too heavy for her slender frame. She stood there, holding a stack of plates, her expression an innocent mix of polite customer service and mild curiosity. She had no idea what she had just done. She had no idea that she had just shifted the tectonic plates of his isolated world. Marcus felt his tailored Brioni suit constrict around his chest like a straitjacket. The ambient clinking of fine silverware in the restaurant faded into a deafening roar in his ears. Slowly, he lowered his fork. The heavy, custom-forged ring on his left hand, the thick platinum band inlaid with dark Gibeon meteorite and a flush-set square-cut cobalt sapphire, suddenly felt heavier than it had in 25 years. He stared at Sophia. His voice, when it finally came, was barely a rasp. "What did you say?" Sophia blinked, suddenly nervous at the intensity of his reaction. She took a small step back, the plates in her hands trembling slightly. "I'm sorry, sir. I shouldn't have said anything." "It's none of my business." But Marcus's hand shot out, not violently but desperately, wrapping around her wrist with surprising gentleness. "Please," he said, his voice cracking with an emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in decades. "Describe the ring your mother has." "Exactly." Sophia's heart was pounding now. She could feel the eyes of nearby tables turning toward them. This powerful, intimidating man, this billionaire whose name appeared in financial headlines, was looking at her with raw, agonizing desperation. "It's smaller than yours," she said softly, her voice shaking. "More delicate. The band is silver, but it has that same dark-etched rock in the middle and a blue square stone. She never takes it off. She told me it was made from a meteorite, a piece of a fallen star." Marcus closed his eyes. A single jagged breath escaped his lips. 25 years ago, in a cramped Seattle apartment, a much younger Ashwin Mehta had whispered to a beautiful, laughing woman, "I want to give you the stars, Samantha. Since I can't reach them, I had a piece of one forged just for you." He had slipped the delicate silver ring onto her finger, the feminine counterpart to the heavy platinum band he still wore. Now, standing in this opulent Chicago restaurant, the weight of 25 lost years crashed down on him all at once. He opened his eyes. They were shining, rimmed with sudden, overwhelming moisture. He looked at the young woman standing before him. He looked at her dark chestnut hair, the shape of her jaw, the hazel eyes. "What is your mother's name?" he asked, the words feeling like shards of glass in his throat. Sophia frowned, her apprehension returning. "Why do you want to know?" "Please," Marcus begged. The CEO of Langford Capital, a man who commanded billions, was begging a waitress. "Samantha," Sophia said slowly. "Samantha Hayes." Marcus felt the ground completely give way beneath him. The name echoed in his mind like a gunshot. Samantha Hayes, the only woman he had ever truly loved. The woman his father had torn away from him. The woman he had been told had taken a payoff and aborted their child. Now, standing in front of him, was a girl with her hazel eyes, his daughter. Marcus Langford stood frozen in the middle of the opulent dining room of the Grand Horizon Hotel. The name Samantha Hayes had hit him like a physical blow to the chest. 25 years of carefully constructed emotional armor. The walls he had built around his heart after losing the only woman he had ever loved cracked open in a single instant. His cold, slate-gray eyes, usually so calculating and distant, were now wide with raw, unfiltered shock. The heavy platinum ring on his left hand, the one made from Gibeon meteorite with the cobalt sapphire, suddenly felt like it was burning against his skin. He stared at Sophia as if seeing a ghost. His voice, when it finally came, was barely above a whisper. "Samantha Hayes?" Sophia took another small step back, her heart racing. She had only meant to make a passing comment about the unusual ring. She had no idea she had just opened a door to a past that had been buried for a quarter of a century. "Yes," she said cautiously. "That's my mother's name. Why? Do you know her?" Marcus's hand trembled as he reached out, not to grab her this time, but as if he needed to steady himself. I knew her. A long time ago." His voice cracked. "A very long time ago." The surrounding tables had gone completely silent now. Even the wealthiest patrons, who usually minded their own business, were openly staring. The clinking of silverware had stopped. The soft jazz playing in the background suddenly felt entirely out of place. Sophia's mind was spinning. This powerful, intimidating man, this billionaire whose name she had seen in financial news, was looking at her with an expression she had never seen on anyone before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't arrogance. It was something much deeper. It was pain. Raw, crushing, decades-old pain. "I need to see her," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a desperate, gravelly whisper. "I need you to take me to her. Tonight." Sophia's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you crazy? I don't even know you. I'm not taking some random aggressive stranger from my job to my mother's house." She turned to leave, but Marcus stepped into the aisle, blocking her path. He wasn't aggressive this time. His presence was simply an immovable wall. "Sophia, listen to me," he said, his voice laced with a frantic, desperate pleading that was entirely foreign to him. "My name is Marcus Langford. Look me up on your phone right now if you have to. I am not going to hurt you. I promise you on my life, I will not harm a hair on your head. But the ring your mother wears, I had it made. I designed it. I bought the meteorite and the sapphire, and I had a jeweler in Seattle craft 2 rings, one for me and one for the woman I was going to marry." Sophia stared at him, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She looked from his face down to the ring on his left hand. The dark alien rock, the bright blue sapphire. Her mother had told her 100 different stories about that ring over the years, that she found it in a vintage shop, that it belonged to her grandmother, that it was a cheap trinket. But she never took it off. She guarded it with her life. "My mother is sick," Sophia said, her voice defensively sharp, masking the trembling beneath. "She has congestive heart failure. She's weak, and she's not supposed to be stressed. Whatever history you think you have with her, I'm not bringing a man who looks like he's about to have a nervous breakdown into our apartment." The word sick hit Marcus like a physical blow to the ribs. Samantha was sick. He reached into the breast pocket of his Brioni jacket and pulled out a slim leather checkbook and a Mont Blanc fountain pen. He rested the checkbook on the edge of the dining table and quickly scrawled his signature, filling out a line of numbers. He ripped the check out and held it out to Sophia. "This is a cashier's check for $50,000, Marcus said evenly, his eyes locked onto hers. "It's real. Call my bank tomorrow. They will verify it. Take it. Use it for her medical bills. Use it for whatever you want. Just take me to her. Let me see her face. If she tells me to leave, I will walk out the door and you will never see me again. You keep the money either way." Sophia looked at the piece of paper trembling in his large hand. 50,000! It was an astronomical sum. It was the difference between her mother getting the specialized cardiac care she desperately needed and dying in the cramped, humid apartment they shared. It was the difference between Sophia dropping out of community college and actually having a future. She looked at Marcus beneath the expensive suit and the intimidating aura. She saw a man who looked like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to be pushed or pulled back. "You're Marcus Langford," she said quietly, recognizing the name now. "The billionaire. The man who owns half the shipping yards in the city." "I am," he replied. Sophia bit her lower lip, a habit that sent a fresh shockwave of recognition through Marcus's system. Her mother used to do the exact same thing when she was thinking. "My shift ends in 20 minutes, Sophia said, her voice barely a whisper, snatching the check from his hand and shoving it deep into her apron pocket. "Wait outside in your car. If you try to follow me or do anything weird, I will scream, and I carry pepper spray." Marcus nodded slowly, a profound, shuddering relief washing over him. "I'll be in the black Maybach out front. Take your time." The drive to the south side of Chicago was the longest journey of Marcus Langford's life. He sat in the plush leather of the back seat of the black Maybach, the rain still beating relentlessly against the windows. Sophia sat rigidly as far away from him as possible, staring out at the rain-slicked streets. The silence in the car was heavy, pregnant with a quarter-century of unanswered questions. Marcus's driver, Thomas, navigated the heavy armored vehicle through neighborhoods that progressively lost their gloss. The gleaming glass skyscrapers of downtown faded into squat brick tenement buildings, neon liquor store signs, and dimly lit streets. Marcus couldn't take his eyes off Sophia's reflection in the window. The math was violently simple. 25 years ago, Samantha was pregnant when she disappeared. Sophia looked 24. The realization that he was likely sitting next to his own daughter, a daughter he was told had been aborted, a daughter who had spent her life scraping by in diners while he sat on a fortune, was a poison burning through his veins. The hatred he felt for his late father in that moment was boundless, a dark, consuming fire. "Turn left at the next light," Sophia instructed Thomas, her voice cutting through the silence. "It's the brick building on the corner. Number 412. The Maybach pulled up to the curb, its tires hissing against the wet asphalt. The building was in a state of severe disrepair. The brickwork was crumbling. The front door was propped open with a cinder block, and a flickering street lamp cast long, eerie shadows across the entrance. Marcus stepped out of the car. Ignoring the rain that immediately began soaking his expensive suit, he looked up at the building. "This is where she's been. While I lived in a 30-room mansion, she's been surviving here." Sophia unlocked the heavy metal security door, leading him into a narrow hallway that smelled strongly of boiled cabbage and damp carpet. They climbed 3 flights of stairs in silence. Marcus's heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribcage. He felt lightheaded, terrified. He had commanded armies of lawyers and faced down global economic crises. But climbing these stairs required more courage than he had ever mustered in his life. They reached a battered wooden door at the end of the hall, apartment 3B. Sophia paused, her hand on the brass doorknob. She turned to look at Marcus. The dim hallway light cast hollow shadows under her eyes. "Listen to me," she whispered fiercely. "She's frail. Some days are worse than others. Today is a bad day." If you upset her, I swear to God I will throw you down these stairs myself, billionaire or not." "I understand," Marcus whispered back, his voice thick with emotion. Sophia turned the key and pushed the door open. The apartment was painfully small, but impeccably clean. The furniture was worn, thrift store salvage covered with knitted throw blankets. A small tube television hummed quietly in the corner. In a faded floral armchair positioned by the single rain-streaked window sat a woman. She was wrapped in a thick shawl, her back to the door, staring out at the city. "Mom!" Sophia called out softly, stepping into the room and leaving Marcus standing in the doorway. "I'm home! I brought someone to see you!" The woman in the chair stirred slowly. With obvious physical effort, she turned her head. Marcus stopped breathing. Time was a cruel artist, but it hadn't completely erased the masterpiece. Her hair, once a vibrant, fiery cascade, was now thin and streaked with heavy silver, cut short to her chin. Her face was pale, lined with exhaustion and the visible toll of chronic illness. But the eyes, those striking, intelligent hazel eyes, were exactly the same. It was Samantha. Marcus took a tentative, shaking step into the apartment. The floorboards creaked beneath his weight. Samantha's gaze shifted from her daughter to the massive, imposing figure standing in her living room. For a second, there was no recognition, just the mild confusion of a woman wondering why a man in a bespoke suit was in her home. Then, Marcus stepped fully into the light cast by the cheap floor lamp. The transformation in Samantha was instantaneous and terrifying. The color drained completely from her already pale face. Her eyes blew wide, filled with a sudden, unadulterated terror. She gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles turning white, her chest heaving as she struggled to pull oxygen into her failing heart. "No!" Samantha choked out, a raw, guttural sound of sheer panic. She shrank back into the chair, pressing herself against the cushions as if trying to merge with the upholstery. She reached up with a trembling hand, clutching at her chest. Beneath the fabric of her worn nightgown, the silver chain dug into her collarbone, holding the heavy meteorite ring against her skin. "Get him out!" Samantha screamed, the sound tearing through the small apartment violently. "Sophia, get him out now! How did he find us?" "Get him away from me." Sophia dropped her purse and rushed to her mother's side, kneeling beside the chair and wrapping her arms around the trembling woman. Mom, it's okay. Breathe. Please remember your heart. He's just a man from the restaurant. He saw the ring." "He's not just a man," Samantha sobbed, her eyes fixed on Marcus with a hatred so pure it made him physically recoil. "He's a monster. He's the man who tried to kill you before you were even born." Marcus froze, kneeling on the floor, the words echoing in the cramped room like gunshots. "Tried to kill you." He stared at Samantha, his mind fracturing. "Sam, what are you talking about? My father told me you took the money. He told me you got rid of the baby. I never stopped looking for you." "I thought you didn't want me." Samantha let out a bitter, hollow laugh that turned into a wet, rattling cough. She glared at him over her daughter's shoulder. "Your father!" Samantha spat, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. "Your father never spoke to me, Marcus. You did." "You came to the apartment with 2 men in suits. You threw an envelope of cash at me and told me I was a mistake. You told them to take me to the clinic and make sure the problem was handled, and when I ran, you sent them after me to run my car off the road." Marcus couldn't speak. He couldn't move. He stared at the woman he loved, realizing with sickening clarity that the lies ran far deeper and darker than he could have ever comprehended. He hadn't just been betrayed by his father. His identity had been stolen, weaponized, and used to destroy the only family he ever truly wanted. And as Sophia looked from her terrified mother to the billionaire weeping on their floor, the truth of her existence finally began to crack open the foundation of her entire life. The drive to Northwestern Memorial Hospital was a blur of flashing lights and sirens. Marcus had called in every favor he had. The Maybach was escorted by 2 police cruisers, their lights cutting through the rain as they cleared a path through the wet Chicago streets. Sophia sat in the back seat, holding her mother's hand, her face pale with fear. Samantha lay unconscious on the stretcher, her breathing shallow and labored. Marcus sat opposite them, his expensive suit soaked from the rain, his hands trembling as he watched the woman he had loved, the woman he thought he had lost forever, fighting for her life. He had mobilized his private medical team. Dr. K. Aris Thorne, one of the best cardiothoracic specialists in North America, was already waiting at the hospital's VIP wing. When they arrived, the medical staff moved with military precision. Samantha was rushed into the ICU while Marcus and Sophia were guided to a private waiting room. The room was quiet, almost too quiet. Sophia sat on the edge of a white leather sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Marcus stood by the window, staring out at the dark Chicago skyline, the rain still falling in sheets. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Sophia broke the silence. "Why did you come looking for her?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus turned slowly. His face, usually so composed and commanding, was etched with raw pain. "Because I never stopped loving her," he said quietly. "I thought she had left me. I thought she had taken money from my father and ended our child. I spent years searching for her, but my father made sure I never found her. He made sure I believed she didn't want me." Sophia looked down at her hands. "My mother told me my father tried to kill her. She said he sent men to run her car off the road. She said he wanted me gone before I was even born." Marcus closed his eyes, the weight of his father's betrayal hitting him again. "My father was a monster," he whispered. "He didn't just want her gone. He wanted me broken. He wanted me to become the cold, ruthless son he needed to run his empire. He used my cousin Harrison to impersonate me. He forged documents. He staged everything." He opened his eyes and looked at Sophia. "I didn't know you existed. If I had known, I would have burned the world down to find you both." Sophia studied his face for a long moment. She saw the genuine pain in his eyes. She saw the man who had just mobilized a private medical team and a helicopter to save her mother. She saw a man who was finally confronting the lies that had destroyed his life. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said softly, "but I know my mother has carried this pain for 25 years. If there's even a chance that what you're saying is true, she deserves to hear it from you." Marcus nodded slowly. "I will tell her everything. And if she tells me to leave, I will walk away. But I will make sure both of you are taken care of for the rest of your lives. No matter what." The waiting stretched on for hours. Doctors came and went, updating them on Samantha's condition. She had suffered a severe myocardial infarction brought on by acute stress and her pre-existing congestive heart failure. They had stabilized her, but she would need a heart transplant in the near future if she was to have any real quality of life. Marcus immediately put her at the top of the donor registry and offered whatever it took to make it happen. At 3:30 a.m., Dr. Thorne finally emerged from the ICU. "She's stable for now," he said, "but she's heavily sedated. You can see her through the glass, but she won't wake for several hours." Sophia stood up, her legs shaky. Marcus stayed behind for a moment, then followed her to the glass partition. Through the glass, they saw Samantha lying in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines and tubes. She looked impossibly fragile, but she was alive. Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes. He hadn't cried in 25 years. Not since the day he thought he had lost Samantha forever. Now, standing beside the daughter he never knew he had, he felt the full weight of everything his father had stolen from him. From all of them. The next 48 hours were a blur of controlled chaos for Marcus Langford. He transformed a private executive suite on the same floor as the ICU into a wartime command center. The ruthless, calculating CEO that had terrified Wall Street for decades was fully unleashed. But this time, the target was not a rival corporation. It was his own family's dark legacy. His director of global security, a pragmatic ex-intelligence officer named Caldwell, had flown in from New York overnight, bringing a team of forensic accountants and cyber investigators. They tore through the Meta archives, bypassing decades of encrypted firewalls that William Meta had paid millions to secure. What they found was a staggering, meticulously documented conspiracy. "Here it is, sir," Caldwell said, his usually stoic voice tinged with disgust as he slid a thick, leather-bound dossier across the glass boardroom table. It was 3:00 in the morning. Outside, the Chicago skyline was a sea of glittering, indifferent lights. Marcus opened the file. Inside were original bank records, heavily redacted communications, and a series of offshore wire transfers. "Your father didn't just hire local muscle to run Ms. Hayes off the road," Caldwell explained, pointing to a specific transaction routed through the Cayman Islands. "He hired a private security firm out of Seattle. The operatives were instructed to retrieve the ring and ensure she miscarried under the guise of an intimidation tactic gone wrong. And the man who visited her apartment that night," Caldwell continued, "we tracked his movements. It was your cousin Harrison. William paid him $4 million to play the part." Marcus stared at the black-and-white photograph of his cousin attached to the file. Harrison Langford, currently living on a sprawling equestrian estate in Aspen, Colorado, funded by a trust Marcus himself had approved 10 years prior. The physical resemblance between them in their 20s was undeniable. The same jawline, the same build. In the dark, pouring rain wearing Marcus's signature overcoat, it was a flawless, devastating deception. "Where is Harrison now?" Marcus asked, his voice dead of all emotion. It was the tone he used right before he dismantled an empire. "At his estate in Aspen," Caldwell replied. "Should I involve federal authorities?" "Not yet," Marcus said, closing the file. "Freeze every asset he possesses, empty his trusts, liquidate his holdings, lock him out of his own accounts. I want him to wake up tomorrow morning with absolutely nothing. Then send our people to bring him to Chicago. He is going to look Samantha in the eye and confess." Before Caldwell could respond, Marcus's encrypted phone buzzed. It was Dr. Thorne, the attending cardiologist who had taken over the shift. "Mr. Langford, she's awake!" Marcus left the boardroom without another word, his heart hammering violently against his ribs. When he reached the ICU, Sophia was already standing by the glass partition, wearing a fresh sweater, tears streaming down her face as she looked into the room. Marcus stopped beside her. Through the glass, he saw Samantha. She looked impossibly fragile amidst the tangle of tubes and monitors, her pale skin contrasting sharply with the white hospital linen. But her eyes were open. She remembered everything from the apartment. She had panicked when she woke up. Sophia had to sit with her for an hour, explaining it to her. She told her about Marcus's father. She told her about Harrison. Marcus took a deep, steadying breath. He pushed open the heavy door and stepped into the sterile hum of the ICU room. Samantha's head turned slowly on the pillow. The sheer terror he had seen in her eyes at the apartment was gone, replaced by a profound, cautious exhaustion. She watched him approach, her gaze dropping to the heavy meteorite ring still resting on his left hand. Marcus did not approach the bed immediately. He stopped a respectful distance away and carefully laid the dossier Caldwell had given him onto the bedside table. "I'm not going to ask for your forgiveness, Sam," Marcus said quietly, the raw vulnerability in his voice filling the quiet room. "I failed to protect you. I failed to protect our daughter. No amount of money or retribution will ever give us back the 25 years my father stole from us." He opened the dossier, turning it so she could see the pages. "This is the proof," Marcus continued, his voice thick with unshed tears. "The bank transfers my father faked. The itinerary proving I was in London when you were attacked, and the payment records to my cousin Harrison to impersonate me. He's being brought to Chicago today. He will confess to the authorities, and he will go to federal prison along with every surviving man who had a hand in hurting you." Samantha weakly lifted a trembling hand, tracing the signature on one of William Langford's authorized transfer forms. A single tear escaped the corner of her eye, tracking down her pale cheek. The nightmare she had lived, the absolute certainty that the man she loved had tried to destroy her, was finally dissolving into the harsh light of the truth. "You didn't hate me," she whispered, her voice raspy from the intubation tube that had been removed hours prior. "I never stopped loving you," Marcus replied, finally stepping closer and sinking into the chair beside her bed. "I never took off the ring. I never married. I built a fortress because I thought the only light in my life had extinguished herself." Samantha turned her head, her hazel eyes locking onto his slate-gray ones. Slowly, painfully, she reached out her hand. It was frail, the skin translucent, but the delicate silver band with the dark meteorite stone was still clutched tightly in her palm. Marcus reached out, his large, trembling hand gently enveloping hers. It was the first time they had touched in a quarter of a century. "We have a daughter," Samantha breathed, a watery smile breaking through her exhaustion. "She's beautiful, Marcus. She's so smart." "I know," Marcus choked out, pressing his forehead against their joined hands. "I know, and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure neither of you ever have to struggle again." The fallout of Marcus Langford's wrath was swift and absolute. 2 days later, a terrified and financially ruined Harrison Langford was escorted into a private interrogation room in Chicago, flanked by Marcus's high-powered legal team and federal prosecutors. Faced with the undeniable paper trail and the prospect of fighting Marcus's billions, Harrison confessed to everything. He admitted to the impersonation, the psychological torture of Samantha, and his complicity in the attempted murder orchestrated by his late uncle. The resulting scandal rocked the financial world. The media descended like vultures, but Marcus used his immense influence to shield Samantha and Sophia from the press, sequestering them in the hospital's ultra-secure VIP wing. Justice was served coldly and efficiently. Harrison and the 3 surviving operatives from the Seattle security firm were indicted on federal charges ranging from wire fraud to conspiracy to commit murder. But Marcus's true focus remained entirely on the 4th floor of Northwestern Memorial. 3 weeks after her admission, a viable donor heart became available. Marcus had mobilized a logistical network that rivaled military operations, flying the organ in via private jet with a police escort from the tarmac to the operating room. The surgery took 9 agonizing hours. Marcus and Sophia sat in the waiting room side by side, bound by blood and the shared terror of losing the woman they both loved. When Dr. Thorne finally emerged, his surgical scrub stained but his expression triumphant. Marcus wept for the 2nd time in his life. The recovery was long and arduous. Marcus virtually abandoned his physical presence at Langford Capital, delegating the day-to-day operations to his board of directors. His new boardroom was Samantha's recovery suite. He was there when she took her first steps with her new heart. He was there to ensure Sophia's transfer to the University of Chicago was handled flawlessly, paying her tuition in full and setting up a trust that would ensure she never had to carry a waitress's tray again. 6 months later, the brutal Chicago winter had melted into a vibrant, promising spring. Marcus stood on the expansive stone terrace of a secluded, high-security estate he had purchased on the shores of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. The air was crisp and clean, smelling of pine needles and fresh water. The sliding glass doors behind him opened, and Sophia stepped out holding 2 mugs of coffee. She was radiant, the heavy burden of poverty and fear entirely erased from her posture. She handed a mug to Marcus, smiling brightly. "She's up," Sophia said, leaning against the stone balustrade next to him, "and she's demanding to know why you haven't started the grill yet." Marcus chuckled, a deep, genuine sound that he was still getting used to making. "Tell your mother I am a CEO, not a short-order cook." "I heard that, Marcus," a voice called out from the doorway. Marcus turned. Samantha stood there, framed by the sunlight. She had gained weight, the color had returned to her cheeks, and her silver-streaked hair was styled and shining. She wore a thick, comfortable sweater, and around her neck, hanging on a new reinforced platinum chain, was the meteorite ring. Marcus set his coffee down and walked over to her. He didn't see the scars or the years they had lost. He only saw the fiery art student from Seattle. He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I have something for you," Marcus said softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it, revealing a stunning, flawless diamond ring. But nested right beside it, resting on the velvet, was the original, delicate silver meteorite band that she had worn around her neck for 25 years. He had taken it to a jeweler the week prior, having it professionally cleaned, reinforced, and sized. "I promised you the stars 25 years ago," Marcus murmured, looking deep into her hazel eyes. "My father managed to block out the sky for a long time, but the clouds are gone now. Marry me! Let me finally be the husband and the father I was supposed to be." Samantha looked at the rings, then at her daughter beaming on the terrace, and finally at the man who had torn down his own empire to save her. "It's about time, Marcus," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes as she held out her left hand. As Marcus slipped the meteorite ring back onto her finger, exactly where it belonged, he felt the heavy, cold weight of his past finally slip away. The billionaire CEO was gone. In his place was simply a man standing with his family, ready to finally live. The fallout of Marcus Langford's wrath was swift and absolute. 2 days later, a terrified and financially ruined Harrison Langford was escorted into a private interrogation room in Chicago, flanked by Marcus's high-powered legal team and federal prosecutors. Faced with the undeniable paper trail and the prospect of fighting Marcus's billions, Harrison confessed to everything. He admitted to the impersonation, the psychological torture of Samantha, and his complicity in the attempted murder orchestrated by his late uncle. The resulting scandal rocked the financial world. The media descended like vultures, but Marcus used his immense influence to shield Samantha and Sophia from the press, sequestering them in the hospital's ultra-secure VIP wing. Justice was served coldly and efficiently. Harrison and the 3 surviving operatives from the Seattle security firm were indicted on federal charges ranging from wire fraud to conspiracy to commit murder. But Marcus's true focus remained entirely on the 4th floor of Northwestern Memorial. 3 weeks after her admission, a viable donor heart became available. Marcus had mobilized a logistical network that rivaled military operations, flying the organ in via private jet with a police escort from the tarmac to the operating room. The surgery took 9 agonizing hours. Marcus and Sophia sat in the waiting room side by side, bound by blood and the shared terror of losing the woman they both loved. When Dr. Thorne finally emerged, his surgical scrub stained, but his expression triumphant. Marcus wept for the 2nd time in his life. The recovery was long and arduous. Marcus virtually abandoned his physical presence at Langford Capital, delegating the day-to-day operations to his board of directors. His new boardroom was Samantha's recovery suite. He was there when she took her first steps with her new heart. He was there to ensure Sophia's transfer to the University of Chicago was handled flawlessly, paying her tuition in full and setting up a trust that would ensure she never had to carry a waitress's tray again. 6 months later, the brutal Chicago winter had melted into a vibrant, promising spring. Marcus stood on the expansive stone terrace of a secluded, high-security estate he had purchased on the shores of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. The air was crisp and clean, smelling of pine needles and fresh water. The sliding glass doors behind him opened, and Sophia stepped out holding 2 mugs of coffee. She was radiant, the heavy burden of poverty and fear entirely erased from her posture. She handed a mug to Marcus, smiling brightly. "She's up," Sophia said, leaning against the stone balustrade next to him, "and she's demanding to know why you haven't started the grill yet." Marcus chuckled, a deep, genuine sound that he was still getting used to making. "Tell your mother I am a CEO, not a short-order cook." "I heard that, Marcus," a voice called out from the doorway. Marcus turned. Samantha stood there, framed by the sunlight. She had gained weight. The color had returned to her cheeks, and her silver-streaked hair was styled and shining. She wore a thick, comfortable sweater, and around her neck, hanging on a new reinforced platinum chain, was the meteorite ring. Marcus set his coffee down and walked over to her. He didn't see the scars or the years they had lost. He only saw the fiery art student from Seattle. He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I have something for you," Marcus said softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it, revealing a stunning, flawless diamond ring. But nested right beside it, resting on the velvet, was the original, delicate silver meteorite band that she had worn around her neck for 25 years. He had taken it to a jeweler the week prior, having it professionally cleaned, reinforced, and sized. "I promised you the stars 25 years ago," Marcus murmured, looking deep into her hazel eyes. "My father managed to block out the sky for a long time, but the clouds are gone now. Marry me! Let me finally be the husband and the father I was supposed to be." Samantha looked at the rings, then at her daughter beaming on the terrace, and finally at the man who had torn down his own empire to save her. "It's about time, Marcus," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes as she held out her left hand. As Marcus slipped the meteorite ring back onto her finger, exactly where it belonged, he felt the heavy, cold weight of his past finally slip away. The billionaire CEO was gone. In his place was simply a man standing with his family, ready to finally live. The tragedy of lost time is a phantom that haunts many, but it is ultimately powerless against the enduring gravity of the truth. Marcus and Samantha's journey is a testament to the fact that while greed and malice can build formidable walls and steal decades of joy, they cannot extinguish the fundamental connection between two people meant to share a life. The meteorite rings, born from chaotic cosmic destruction, became the perfect anchor for a family that had to survive their own personal apocalypse. Through Sophia, the unintentional bridge between two shattered worlds, a broken legacy was dismantled and a new one was forged. Not with ruthless corporate power, but with forgiveness, relentless dedication, and love. Sometimes the most profound wealth a person can acquire is simply the chance to finally come home. Marcus Langford stood on the expansive stone terrace of the Lake Geneva estate, the morning sun painting the water in soft gold. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and fresh water. For the first time in 25 years, he felt something he had long forgotten. Peace. Not the cold, calculated peace of isolation he had cultivated for so long, but real peace, the kind that comes when the missing pieces of your soul finally click back into place. Samantha walked slowly toward him, her steps still careful but growing stronger every day. The new heart had given her a second chance at life, and Marcus had made it his mission to ensure she never had to struggle again. She slipped her hand into his, the meteorite ring on her finger catching the light. "Do you remember the night you gave me this?" she asked softly. Marcus smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "How could I forget? I told you I wanted to give you the stars. Since I couldn't reach them, I brought a piece of one down for you." Samantha leaned her head against his shoulder. "I kept it close to my heart every single day, even when I believed you had betrayed me, even when I thought you wanted me gone. I never took it off." Marcus closed his eyes, the weight of those lost years pressing against his chest. "I never took mine off either. I wore it as a reminder of what I thought I had lost. Now I wear it as a reminder of what I almost lost forever." Sophia stepped out onto the terrace, carrying 3 mugs of coffee. She looked radiant. The heavy burden of poverty and fear that had weighed on her for years was gone. She handed a mug to each of her parents, then leaned against the stone balustrade beside them. "So," she said with a small smile, "what happens now?" Marcus looked at his daughter. His daughter! And felt a surge of emotion so strong it nearly brought him to his knees. "Now," he said, his voice thick, "we live. We make up for lost time. We build something real. Not an empire built on fear and control, but a family built on truth and love." Samantha reached out and took Sophia's hand, linking the three of them together. "I spent 25 years running from a ghost," she said quietly. "Today, I'm standing here with both of you. That's more than I ever dared to hope for." The three of them stood in silence for a long moment, watching the sun rise over the lake. The past would always be there. The pain, the betrayal, the lost years. But it no longer defined them. They had survived their own personal apocalypse, and in the aftermath, they had found each other again. Marcus looked at the two women who now held his heart. "I promise you both," he said, his voice steady and full of conviction, "I will spend the rest of my life making sure neither of you ever feels invisible again." Sophia smiled, squeezing her mother's hand. "We're not invisible anymore, Dad." The word "Dad" hit Marcus like a wave. He had to turn away for a moment, blinking back tears. For the first time in decades, the ruthless billionaire CEO allowed himself to feel, to hope, to love. And as the three of them stood together on that terrace, the meteorite rings on their fingers catching the morning light, they understood something profound. True power isn't measured in billions or boardrooms. It isn't built on fear or control. True power is the courage to face the lies that try to destroy you, the strength to forgive, the resilience to rebuild, and the love that refuses to stay buried, no matter how deep the betrayal. The story of Marcus, Samantha, and Sophia proves that hard karma eventually comes for everyone. But it also proves that redemption is possible. That lost time can be reclaimed, that a single moment of courage, a single sentence spoken calmly in the face of arrogance can change everything. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Because the person you dismiss today might just be the one who holds your future in their hands tomorrow. And sometimes, the most valuable thing in the world isn't power, wealth, or status. It's the chance to finally come home. Thank you for watching. If this story of quiet strength and unexpected justice moved you, hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories like this, where arrogance meets hidden brilliance and power quietly flips in the most satisfying way, then make sure to subscribe to Veiled Flame and turn on notifications. We upload new stories every week. Until next time, remember, never underestimate the quiet ones. Because the person you overlook today might be the one who changes everything tomorrow. See you in the next story.